Hi there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. Today, Hellboy's Lovecraftian monster, Ogdru Jahad, and his monstrous 369 cosmic horror children explained. Speaking of comic books and their characters, Marvel and DC have always had a monopoly over fame. Their popularity cannot be questioned, but only admired. However, today we'll be talking about one of the most underrated comic book characters, Hellboy. Belonging to the Dark Horse comic book company and originating from the creative mind of Mark Mignola, Hellboy is a well-meaning half-demon brought to Earth to destroy reality, but instead becomes the world's greatest paranormal detective. The comic book stories and their characters are inspired by Lovecraftian ideas, pulp fiction, horror, and folklore. One such monster character from the comics is Ogdru Jahad. The Ogdru Jahad are the 7 gods of chaos and serpentine entities that wait for their release from the crystal prison only to destroy the world. These creatures were developed from a blend of Christian myths and Lovecraftian themes, whose preliminary sketch was done by Mignola himself. Later, with the collaboration of Toro, the monster's design got an aesthetic deviation from their purely serpentine appearance. So, without any further delay, let's dig deep into the character origin and details of the mystical and terrifying Ogdru Jahad. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Ogdru Jahad? The Ogdru Jahad, alternatively known as the Ogdru Jahad, were gigantic monsters derived from H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. In the biblical sense, they're the 7-headed dragon of Revelation and are prophesied to bring about the doom of the world. The Ogdru Jahad, along with the serpents, the beasts, the 7 who are one, and the 7 gods of chaos, are the major adversaries of Mark Mignola's Hellboy comic book series. The right hand of doom imprisoned them in their golden cocoons shortly after the genesis of Earth, but not before they bore 369 children known as the Yotha-Hem. At the beginning of time, God had formed an order of spirits. Many of the greater spirits were dispatched to the fledgling Earth to serve as watchers. Anum, one of these spirits, fashioned the Ogdru Jahad from fire and dirt. The other spirits began to cast spells and wards around the dragon, even reinfusing it with fire, but the entity remained dead. However, when darkness fell, the Ogdru Jahad awakened and was imbued with purpose and function, giving birth to the Yotha-Hem, the Earth's earliest lifeforms. The physical appearance of the Ogdru Jahad is similar to that of Archaeopteryx, with some aquatic features. The several attempts of the comic's antagonists to liberate the Ogdru Jahad make it clear that the liberation of the Ogdru Jahad is inextricably linked to the destruction of mankind. It's unknown whether the fall of man causes or immediately follows the release. Ogdru Jahad's intentions may be hard to explain in human words as an immortal and massively powerful being whose ultimate nature transcends understanding. Aside from the core notion of gaining liberation and subsequently destroying the Earth, there is considerable disagreement over what the Ogdru Jahad will do once free. The aliens that keep an eye on the Ogdru Jahad's cosmic prison appear to view Earth as a focal point required to keep the prison running. If the Ogdru Jahad are allowed to free themselves, they'll destroy the Earth and ultimately the whole universe. Hermann von Klemt thinks that after man is eliminated, the 369 Ogdru-Hem will break free from their confinement, liberate the Ogdru Jahad, and burn the Earth to ashes. Similarly, Hellboy's hand was seized and used to liberate the Ogdru Jahad, who subsequently burned the Earth to cinders in Bogrush's nightmares. Ogdru-Hem, the 369 children of the demonic Ogdru Jahad. The grotesque 369 progeny of the evil Ogdru Jahad are known as the Ogdru-Hem. Even though the Ogdru-Hem are simply inferior replicas of their parents, they hold unfathomable power. The Watchers imprisoned all of the Ogdru-Hem, but many are now re-emerging with the help of Grigory Rasputin and other Ogdru Jahad spies. Several of the Ogdru-Hem have no bodies and dwell in the air, unseen. Under investigation, the physical form of at least one Ogdru-Hem has been determined to be a type of fungus. This body was fashioned from blood at some time in the distant past, leaving it uncertain whether the same is true for the initial bodies fashioned by the Ogdru Jahad. Every one of the Ogdru-Hem may modify living organisms with their breath, with frogs being the most prominent example. Sepactli-Hem. Cipactli was the first day of the Aztec divinatory count of 13 times 20 days, and Cipactonal, the sign of Cipactli, was thought to be the first diviner. The crocodile represented the earth floating in primordial waters in Aztec cosmology. According to one Aztec legend, Teocipactli, or divine crocodile, was the name of a flood survivor who recovered in a kayak and colonized the land. Crocodile Day is related to dynasty origins in the Mixtec Vienna Codex. Cipactli was a prehistoric sea creature of undetermined gender who was part crocodile, part fish, and part toad or frog. Every joint on its body was ornamented with an additional mouth because it was always hungry. Tezcatlipoca, the god, sacrificed a foot as bait to bring the monster closer. He and Quetzalcoatl formed the earth's body. Cipactli-Hem was a deity worshipped by the Aztec, but was originally an Ogdru-Hem spirit. The monster had its first comic book appearance in The Shape of Things to Come. The Conqueror Worm. The Conqueror Worm was one of the 369 Ogdru-Hem. The Conqueror Worm gets its name from Edgar Allan Poe's poem of the same name. It is often used as the American title for Vincent Price's British horror film, Witchfinder General. In 1939, anxious to obtain a decisive advantage over the Allies in World War II, the Nazis established contact with malicious creatures in space, who claimed that if a dead corpse was transported into space for one of them to occupy, it would return to Earth with the capacity to destroy their foes. The Nazis wrapped the slain Dr. Ernst Erming's body in a spacesuit and launched it on board a spaceship from Hunt Castle in Austria. But the mission was interrupted by Lobster Johnson. Hermann von Klemt infiltrated Hunt Castle and reignited the ancient equipment, sending the recall signal to return Dr. Erming's capsule back to Earth. 61 years later, the Conqueror Worm emerged as it landed. Hellboy, Roger, and the lobster's spirit vanquished the worm by using a power cell provided to Hellboy by the extraterrestrial. The Conqueror Worm has skills comparable to those of Sadhu-Hem, who arrived at Cavendish Hall and resurfaced during the Plague of Frogs. Genu-Hem. Genu-Hem was one of Ogdru Jahad's offspring. During the events of Hell on Earth, it came close to reviving itself. Abe Sapien traveled to Grey Rock in San Juan County, Colorado, after leaving the BPRD during his second metamorphosis. Looking for a place to rest, Abe went to a nearby church and was cordially welcomed by the priest to spend the night there. Several survivors in the church were discovered to have been afflicted by mutations produced by the Ogdru-Hem, which the priest declared to be the presence of God. When the priest and the enraged survivors turned aggressive towards one another, the priest explosively transformed into an enormous monstrosity in an instant. This monster proclaimed the name Genu-Hem, stating that the human spirit within him was not alone and that he was more than simply the priest. Iztra-Hem. Iztra-Hem is one of the imprisoned Ogdru-Hem in the Mona egg. Like Sadhu-Hem and the Conqueror Worm, it also uses its breath to generate frog creatures. Catha-Hem. Serving the third black flame, the Catha-Hem was one of the 369 Ogdru-Hem, or Ogdru Jahad's children. Being larger than even the 7 Ogdru Jahads, it is the only known Ogdru-Hem capable of altering inanimate objects with its breath. Catha-Hem was the fourth and perhaps the most fearsome of the Ogdru-Hem to be unleashed on the planet. While Sadhu-Hem was predicted to bring about Plague of Frogs, the appearance of Catha-Hem signaled that the world was about to alter. Mera-Hem. While chasing a cold people clan, the ancient tribe commanded by Gal-Denar came upon Mera-Hem. The clan was led into a valley by the hunt, where they discovered an ancient decaying temple devoted to the Black Goddess. Before a huge fight between the two sides, a leader among the cold people insulted Gal-Denar and his tribe. Ka, a prehistoric scout, was hurt early into the combat and slipped bleeding into the temple's grounds. This blood, together with the severity and violence of the conflict, brought the soul of Mera-Hem to the temple, where he attacked and killed both the caveman and the cold people. Things appeared gloomy until Gal-Denar killed the cold people's leader, causing Mera-Hem to disperse into the air. Mr. Todd's creature. The appearance of Mr. Todd's creature can be traced back to 1979, when Hellboy visited Portland, Oregon. Mr. Todd's assistant, Mary Ann Glozek, requested assistance from the BPRD. Hellboy had seen Mr. Todd, a corporeal medium, perform a few years ago, who was now under drugs to enter his trance state. However, this time Mr. Todd made contact with something different altogether, in the shape of a tentacled entity that partially emerges from Mr. Todd's ectoplasm. Hellboy burns Arbutus, an herb intended to ward off evil, but not before the beast captures Hellboy. The creature and Hellboy are dragged back into Mr. Todd's body. Mr. Todd's corpse expands and crumbles, leaving Hellboy standing. Yotha-Hem. The Ogdru Jahad made Yotha-Hem. He was slain by the Watcher Angels and subsequently reincarnated at Gorunium following the fall of Hyperborea. Yotha-Hem was found by Grigory Rasputin in the Gorunium temple at the top of the Arctic Circle, imprisoned on Earth so that the Ogdru Jahad would always have a footing in the land from which they were expelled. Yotha-Hem physically looked like a hideous mess of tentacles and snapping claws, with a cluster of eyeballs and feelers acting as its head. Yotha-Hem was supposed to be the link between Rasputin and the Ogdru Jahad, but was demolished after Abe Sapien jabbed Rasputin to death and Liz Sherman set fire to the entire site. Even though Yotha-Hem was supposedly destroyed, a little bit of him was discovered in the Cavendish Hall ruins by the BPRD. Director Thomas Manning had the specimen of fungus kept in a New Jersey facility until Yotha-Hem became strong enough to assimilate a human form and flee. Before being ritually sacrificed by Liz Sherman again, Yotha-Hem fled to Crab Point, Michigan, and turned the entire town into savage frog monsters. Urgo-Hem. Urgo-Hem was one of the 369 Ogdru-Hem. Urgo-Hem was set free thanks to the blood of a 16th century Spanish priest. The priest had spent some time at Tenochtitlan before he perished and had studied about the Ogdru-Hem's history there. Urgo-Hem was unleashed by the priest's blood when Hellboy came upon him. This kid of the Ogdru Jahad appeared to be an aquatic beast with pointed crustacean legs bordering its pale underbelly. Urgo-Hem skewered itself on the mast of a neighboring shipwreck after a terrible struggle, and Hellboy fled. Yotha-Hem. Yotha-Hem, one of the Ogdru Jahad's offspring, is said to be the thing that tormented the survivors of an excursion to the Earth's hollow areas. Before the city's demise, Hyperborean priests who had been committed to Hecate's devotion summoned the Ogdru-Hem along with an entity known as Yotha-Hem. This is most likely the same Ogdru-Hem creature that attacked Frankenstein's monster. Yotha-Hem. In the millennia before the Europeans arrived in North America, Yotha-Hem was worshipped in Arizona. A tribe of archaic people sought to summon Yotha-Hem by sacrificing a couple. The visitor, who was headquartered on Earth at the time, utilized the prism to drive Yotha-Hem away, rendering its followers incapacitated. Prior to the events in Beware the Ape, an ape cultist stole a statue of Yotha-Hem. In 1952, a Portuguese statue of Yotha-Hem, which had been feeding on anguish in the citadel, collided with Herman von Klempe's zombie. The undead morphed and enlarged, launching an attack from above on von Klempe and Hellboy. A gas explosion destroyed the corpse, rendering Yotha-Hem bodiless once more. Salton Sea Monster. During the international upheaval sparked by Liz Sherman, this monster rose from the Salton Sea. It possesses a reptilian crustacean body, a lengthy neck, and an arthropod-like head from which scarlet-colored vapors are emitted, causing those who inhale them to change into gray, arthropod-like creatures. When the black flame comes back to Earth, the monster proceeds to wander away to an unknown destination, leaving some eggs behind. One of these eggs hatches and dies in the Salton Sea, while another is destroyed by Phoenix in order to destabilize a cult that had arisen. Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, often known as the Feathered Serpent, was a significant god to the ancient Mesoamericans. With the advent of the Toltec civilization around 900 AD, Quetzalcoatl worship expanded across the region, reaching down to the Yucatan Peninsula, where it was adopted by the Maya. To trace the history of Quetzalcoatl worship, one must travel back to the birth of Mesoamerican civilization. The ancient Olmec civilization lasted roughly from 1200 to 400 BC and had a huge influence on all following civilizations. La Venta Monument 19, a well-known Olmec stonework, depicts a man seated in front of a feathered snake. Although this demonstrates that the notion of a heavenly feathered serpent has existed for a long time, most historians conclude that the Quetzalcoatl religion did not emerge until the late Classic era, hundreds of years later. Quetzalcoatl was a significant deity in the Aztec pantheon. The gods frequently destroyed and rebuilt the world in their mythology. Each age of the planet was granted a new sun, and the world was on its fifth sun after being destroyed 4 times before. Quetzalcoatl's feuds with his brother Tezcatlipoca were occasionally responsible for the world's devastation. Vucub-Caquiche. Vucub-Caquiche, a bird demon, was destroyed by the hero twins as per an 18th century text named Popol Vuh. The story of the demon's destruction was known as early as the late pre-classic period, much before the year 200 AD. He also was the father of Zipacna, a demon deity from the underworld, and Kabrakan, the earthquake god. Vucub-Kakish is portrayed as a mighty bird who masquerades as the sun and moon of the twilight world between the former and current creations. His name, according to contemporary Kish, relates to the 7 stars of the Big Dipper asterism. Aside from the above-mentioned depictions on stone, the identification of classic Mayan bird-shooting images on pottery with the shooting of Vucub-Kakish poses difficulties. For one thing, the bird in question is usually Itzamna's avian change, and the notion of a universally respected creator deity appears to be at odds with the demonic character of Vucub-Kakish. Second, the shooting of the principal bird deity has components that are not seen in the Kishian story. Ogdru Jahad appearances. The Ogdru Jahad are serpentine crustacean beings that previously inhabited and reigned over Earth and are heavily influenced by the great old ones of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. They are pitiless, chaotic, hell-bent on destruction and domination, and frequently so horrifying in appearance that the sheer sight of one of them may cause insanity. Their appearances are seen in the movie Hellboy and the animated series Hellboy: Sword of Storms. In the film Hellboy, Ogdru Jahad serves as the film's overarching antagonist, albeit he is only addressed a few times by name. They look to be faintly cephalopod-like, mirroring their Lovecraftian inspiration more. They are present somewhere in space, imprisoned in their crystal shells. Rasputin, Cronin, and Hauptstein were successful in convincing Hellboy to use his right hand of doom to begin the end times by holding Liz Sherman. Agent John Myers was still able to bring Hellboy back to his senses, and he chose to call it a day before breaking the last lock. The 7 gods of chaos were confined once again, but one of their children, Behemoth, escaped to infiltrate the Earth, only to be killed by Hellboy. Ogdru Jahad appeared as the brothers of Thunder and Lightning in the animated Hellboy: Sword of Storms. Despite not being named, they were referred to as dragons. Hellboy: Sword of Storms is the first installment of the Hellboy animated series, which is based on Mark Mignola's iconic comic book series Hellboy and the live-action film of the same name. While reading the scroll in modern-day Japan, Professor Sakai gets possessed by the spirits of Thunder and Lightning. Simultaneously, Abe Sapien and Liz Sherman are sent to the locations of troubling earthquakes, where they learn that Thunder and Lightning are calling their brethren, the dragons. They encounter the same Kitsune who directed Hellboy and are given the task of stopping the dragons. One of the dragons attacks them, but Liz uses her pyrokinetic skills to keep it at bay. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.